Then you are not the person I hoped you were, they replied, dipping their head. I thought the passion for life burned within you, but instead I have loyalty to my profession, to my patients, to all others within Thornback Hollow who still need me. Lucy begins to gather up their tools. The unfettered enthusiasm with which they launched this project has vanished, replaced by an almost mournful mannered care. I understand, they say at last. You pursue your duty, just as I pursue my desires. I regret that we do not share the same ambitions. Bid them farewell. Sad to see Lucia go, but there's no way I could have promised that. Not being, as we talked about, being someone who was driven by their professionalism, as it were. So yeah, sorry Lucia, but you might be a nice person. There's no way I could abandon a town full of people just for you. As soon as Lucia departs through the laboratory door, the room feels more drab. You take a last look at the rabbits in their new enclosure, making sure they're secure. The animals with the black fur is still exploring its surroundings, while the white and brown one appears to have settled down to nest together in a cocoon of straw. You cast a glance over the panels of prop scenery used to construct the rabbit dwellings, the only remaining splashes of colour now that Lucy has left. The weight of exhaustion you've been carrying since your return to the surface is almost unbearable, draped over every part of every limb like a robe of ringed mail. Embarking upon a short journey you will later be unable to recall, you drag yourself back to your quarters. Okay, so this part here now, I'm very interested. I'm going to look at the stats. Right, so let's have a look at the stats. And this is probably, I would imagine, given the time, is probably in the second part of this session's recording. So, let's see. Your name is Gamma, we know that. You were a wolf mask. Okay. Talents. Position is at 32, Surgeon 60, Mysticism 59, Presence 46, Panache 48, Resilience 54. Okay. We are still certainly more compassionate than ruthless. We are more blasphemous than pious, which probably won't change. We're moving, we're more populist than feudalist. We're more principled than opportunistic, and that principled probably costs us someone who is a potential lover, but we are, as you can see, very principled. We're more jovial than dour. We're doing well at sourcing the contagion. Progress in a cure is still worrying because the spread of infection is certainly outpacing it. We have 1 medical recruit, and we have 15 supplies. Then, in terms of Thornback Hollow, unrest really has overtaken things. Crown favour is 60%, inner revolt 40%. Popular support for Corvée is 56%, and the Dweller influence is at 47%. Okay, and let's have a look at this. Okay, so where are we here? Yeah, capable companions. Alice 75%. Aoko we're at 46%, so Aoko still I don't think Aoko would consider us a friend, and us neither them. And that's not a slight on Aoko. I think it's just reflection of how much time we've chosen to spend with them. We haven't really gotten the time to get to know them, and we haven't really given them the chance to get to know us either. So it would be, I think Aoko would be the kind of person who, by the end of this, they will probably still just be an acquaintance. But if in the future we were to find ourselves in a similar situation again, there would probably be someone that we would become friends with. But right now, Alice is at 74%, very much, we're very much compatible with each other, as it were. And that's why there's kind of the romance is blossoming there, I feel. Lucia, we're at 61%. That was probably higher. Well, it was obviously higher until we turned them down. It was probably around the same as Alice, maybe even a little higher, possibly. But yeah, so Lucia is someone who's definitely a friend. It could have been more, but I think that moment has passed now, and it's maybe not possible anymore. Sybil Blake, we're at 27%, so we've only dropped a little bit with them since we came here, because she started at 30%, but that's obviously going to change because she doesn't know yet that we've turned on her, so she's definitely not going to be happy, but we'll have to see what happens. Rivals and revolutionaries, so Alviva were at 43% and 49% with Rosalind, and we have back Rosalind over Alviva as well. Then Theobald Quelm were just sticking at 30% there. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that with the abbot and indeed the sanctuary, we've kind of taken a hands-off approach, and we've more or less left things up to Alice and Ioko to deal with Theobald mostly. We obviously pop in now and again, but I think that's why that's not moving as much. We're just not having as much interaction. Let's return to the main stats. So there are other options at the bottom, right? On talents and inclinations. Let's have a look at that. So plague doctors are defined by their talents across 6 categories. Okay, that's just it's not something that moves, I guess. And that's going to be the same there as well. Okay, so let's return to the game and continue on. So let's collapse upon our bed. You find yourself back upon the hillside, standing beneath the manors of Thornback Hollow. The crackle of a fierce fire fills your right ear. Smoke thickens the air, dulling all around you with a grey haze. Through the fog you see more bonfire flares on the hill, tall columns of flame reaching for a dusky sky. In horror you realise how these pyres retain their unusual shape. Standing straight, their feet and calves buried in the earth below, are people, engulfed by flames. You rush forward, drawn by the urge to extinguish the fires and pull people free. But as you approach the closest pyre, you feel no heat. The man's eyes are wide open, his skin unblemished, a look of serenity on his face. Looking down, you see a bed of tiny, white flowers. Though the flames emit no heat, there are scratch marks on the vegetation where the flowers have been blackened and burned away. The scene blurs and fades. As you blink awake, the watery film on your eyes finds its way to the corners. A sharp knock at your door almost shakes you right out of bed. As you find your feet and straighten out your undershirt, the knock comes again with more force. Gamel, wake up! Recognizing Ioko's voice, you crack open the door. His boar mask veers towards you, looking more menacing than usual to your bleary eyes and dream-addled brains. About time, your colleague says. Get ready and come to the courtyard, quick! Ioko, what is it? You ask. Aylwin is here, with his dweller cult. They're demanding entry. That's awkward, but everybody's permitted in the sanctuary. I don't see... Permanent entry, Gamel. He's proclaiming himself to be the true and rightful abbot. Not needing to hear more, you scramble to collect your belongings and outfit yourself in the full attire of a plague doctor. Hurry to the courtyard. Ooh, so this is going to be interesting because the abbot has been good to us, but we do kind of like... what's the other guy's? Aylwin. We like Aylwin a lot, but I think he's a bit of a misguided dreamer. I feel that he's chasing this whole dweller in thorns type thing, not necessarily as something that he necessarily believes in, but something that is an escape from what he feels is his duty due to his mother. So yeah, we'll have to... it's going to be a tough decision, but we'll see whether we even get to make it or not. You hear the raised voices even before you step out into the sanctuary courtyard. Robed monks stand shoulder to shoulder, barring your view to the other side. What snow remained in the square area has been trampled and flattened into frozen earth by the soles of more feet than you have ever seen in this space. Pushing and peering through the tight group of monks, you see Ayoko standing on the raised structure of the courtyard well, waving you through towards the centre, which reduces use of their elbows and the relative authority granted by your mask. You manage to squeeze between the rows of uneasy onlookers and join your colleague. Alice has perched herself on the rim of the well, now covered for the winter, and her familiar fox mask tilts in your direction.
You murdered our believers, cast us out of the sanctuary.
You recognise Elwyn's sermonising and audible above the hubbub of the surrounding crowd.
I did not murder anyone,
the abbot, projecting in a tone louder than you've come to expect from the old man.
You speak of people who are long dead on either side.
Following the sounds of the argument, you locate the two men. They stand face to face on the opposite side of the courtyard from where you exited the dormitories. Using the well for support, you stand as tall as you're able, craning your neck to get a better view. Everyone is flanked and backed by what you estimate must be the entire membership of his sect. Either somebody at the archway entrance allowed them to pass, or they forced their way inside. Above ground, their forest-inspired attire seems somewhat exposed and strange.
You are the heretic,
Awen declares in righteous flow.
You worship a false deity, shaped from the blood and ashes of the dweller.
The rest of his sentence is lost in the grumbling voices of those around him, half invigorated, half outraged.
Crowd's getting restless,
Ayoko says, using his vantage point to watch as the monks at the far reaches of the courtyard try to press inward.
I don't like the look of this.
I'd let them have at it. Must we really trouble ourselves with this tussle between theological fictions? We should intervene before anybody gets hurt. We need to stop it getting out of hand. It could spill over into the infirmary. Yeah, let's say that one. We need to stop this before it gets out of hand. It could spill over into the infirmary.
My thoughts exactly,
Ayoko says, making a careful descent from his position.
Come on. So much for being able to devote our time and energy to studying the lichen,
Alice says, scooting down from the edge of the well. As a trio, you find it far easier to push through those standing in your way. Most of the monks try to step aside of their own accord when they see you approach.
Do not presume that I will allow you to spread your sacrilegious screeds in the sage's sanctuary of oak without reply,
Quelm is saying, waving a shaking finger beneath Aylwyn's nose. Sybil Blake's son has the hood of his dark robes pulled back and wears the same circlet of pale flowers on his head. His expression registers your arrival.
Doctors, we meet again,
he says with a slight nod.
You know one another?
Quelm splutters in surprise.
The three of you know that Sybil Blake's heir was leading a perverted cult of blasphemers, and you said nothing? This is... What do you have to say for yourselves? It is you who is the blasphemers, Aeon says. The dweller is the rightful... Silence!
The abbot commands, his voice fraying.
I would hear first from the physicians.
We encountered the dweller sect beneath Thornback Hollow, Alice explains. Aylwyn was among them. The monks nearby whisper their alarm at the idea of cultists hiding below the very streets they walk. Standing at the abbot's side, Prioress Merlinda hushes them with her hand.
It is our duty to cleanse this town of the plague,
Ayoko adds.
We saw no signs of infection among his group, nor any indication that their presence posed any immediate risk. And yet here they stand, ready to ransack our sanctuary and infect us with their heresy,
the abbot shouts, gesticulating towards the sect. The monks at his back tense in readiness. Melinda nods her approval.
The Dweller brings clarity to all who hear them,
Eowyn says, fervent and unbending.
Step aside, false abbot. They will cleanse your lies and embrace all who repent.
Repent,
repent,
echoed the children of the Dweller. Okay, this is a tough choice, but I guess at this stage of the game, they're all tough choices, right? So, gonna rule out two things straight away. First one is siding with Eowyn and the Dwellers, because even if they are the key to, like, in terms of the game, even if they're the key to solving things, we've not seen any move from them to try to solve this. Now, it could be that the Dweller itself is the one who's giving us the dreams that we have and has influenced us that way, but that's the Dweller, that's not the Dweller's followers. So Eowyn has not been helpful, and I don't feel like it would be good to overthrow the mayor for someone more that we feel it would be more stable and more inclined to see our point of view, to then come to the sanctuary and overthrow someone who has backed us, not always, but has given us aid, given us shelter, and has been a stable influence on things, with someone like Eowyn, who is not at all stable as far as we can tell. So that is out. That's pretty simple. The other one then I'm ruling out is, I despair of this theological conflict. It must be ended by any means, because that sounds like we're just gonna let them fight it out and see who wins, and then we could end up with Eowyn in charge again. So that leaves us with two options. One is we just side with the abbot, and then we're not just going against Eowyn, we're going against the Dweller, which has risks to it. And the other one then is, it will be difficult, but I believe I can broker unity between the two. But honestly, I'm not sure I can do that. It feels like that. So I'm kind of, I have to say, I'm very torn here, because from my own instinct, I'm the kind of person who I don't like to see conflict at all, and I would try to broker unity between the two, even if deep down I kind of know that it's only going to be temporary and things are going to flare up again in the future. But it's probably what I would do, rather than openly backing one side over another. So I'm drawn to that. But then Gamel is here to solve the plague, and Gamel has seen that the abbot has backed him at every turn. Or no, not that's wrong, because the abbot obviously wouldn't let them burn the bodies and stuff like that. So not at every turn, but certainly the abbot has been helpful. So how do I solve it? What I'm going to do is, I'm going to toss a coin, because I can't solve it any other way. Right, so it's going to be, there we go, got my coin. Right, so heads, we back the abbot, and then tails, we try to make peace. And it is heads. Right. No peace. Let's just go with the abbot. I serve the abbot in defense of the sage of oak. You should not have come here. Or, it's me, sorry. You should not have come here, you tell Aelwyn. We were content to leave your sect alone while they pose no threat. But this aggression against the sanctuary will not stand. Your actions put the security of our infirmary in peril. Cult leader shakes his head. How swiftly you welcome the false abbot's lies. We have no intention of causing any harm to those suffering from the waiting death. Whether it is your intent or not, you've come here in force to impose your will. Not my will, Aelwyn replies. The will of the dweller in Torns, the once and eternal deity of this community. Right, we're not going to kick them out with force. I call upon the deities themselves to settle this feud. Yeah. Let's see which deity decides things. There's one way to settle the truth of this matter, you say, by calling upon the deities themselves to reveal the rightful inhabitants of this sanctuary. The Sage of Oak does not perform on the command of some would-be mystic, the abbot declares in a belittling tone. A convenient fabrication from a false deity, Aelwyn remarks, never having to prove their own existence. He casts his eyes over you. I say we allow the physician to commune and see what transpires, unless, that is, you fear what he may learn. Well, Quelm flusters as the monks of the sanctuary look on. Perhaps in such a critical moment such as this, the sage may deem us worthy of a benevolent sign. He gives you a pointed glance. Before I begin, you say, stooping to brush aside some of the remaining snow from the spot you intend to use, I must request quiet from those in attendance and urge all parties to accept whatever message the deities choose to bestow. So I see this as... So obviously Gamel is, I wouldn't say a man of science, because I think that Alice really is the person who is dedicated wholly to science. But we certainly are someone who is not religious or mystic. But since we come here, we can't deny what's been happening in our dreams. And how it's influenced our behavior as well. So rather than being like some kind of mystic believer, we're not sure what the hell has been happening since we got here, but something is with us. And this is the point now where we're kind of putting it up to whatever this being or energy is that is trying to influence, to say, listen, now is your time to stop all this kind of veiled clues or influence. Now is your time to openly express what you need from us. And if you can't do that, then we'll just go back and trust in what we've always trusted in. So kind of put up or shut up is how I see this, as us doing this. So let's see what actually happens. Two men nod in agreement, holding up their arms in their respective groups in an effort to bring silence. As you take a cross-legged seat on the frozen earth, the noise of the crowd has dropped to a murmur of expectation. A soft wind billows around the interior of the courtyard. You close your eyes, focus on the sound of the breeze. You try to reach deep into the waiting darkness. As the sensation of the surrounding crowd erase themselves from your consciousness, you probe the waiting void with your mind. A deep thrumming echoes back, vibrating the delicate tissues inside your ears. Though there is nothing beneath you, the space below begins to shake in harmony. Outlines of spectral trees emerge, enclosing you in an ethereal ring. You hear the distant sound of voices chanting in rhythm. The pain in your ears and head begins to pulse in time. Pushing the discomfort aside, you try to focus on the voices, following the rippling sounds to the base of each tree. You see a group of translucent figures, dressed in a garb similar to that worn by the Dweller cultists. They appear to be deep in slumber, yet the clamouring of the unspoken words gets louder, rattling the lower branches of the trees, sending a thin tear through the fabric, through the fabric of the void, where their roots dangle in space. The words manifest into coloured tendrils, sucked towards the widening tear. As the maw opens, the tendrils are yanked and severed from their sleeping hosts. Screams fill your senses, and you struggle to free yourself from the meditative state. You feel the maw begin to draw forth tendrils from your own body, unspooling your thoughts piece by piece. Gasping, you force your eyes to open. Daylight floods back in. Concerned faces look on from the crowd. Alice and Ayoko are at your side, and the abbot's expression is one of alarm.
You are beginning to convulse,
Ayoko whispers.
Are you able to stand?
You nod and brush some dirt off your legs, fighting off a spell of dizziness as you get slowly to your feet.
Well?
Eowyn asks, his head tilted to one side, peering at you as you stand.
You have the look of someone who's communed with the divine.
Aye, you murmur, certain that you witnessed the Dweller, but reticent to endorse an entity of such horror. As you struggle with what you've just gone through, the breeze picks up, sending clumps of snow tumbling from the great boughs of the sanctuary towers. Those standing beneath scramble to dodge the falling objects.
The oaken monuments are uncovered,
Abbot Qualm declares.
The sage has revealed themselves to us.
Seizing the chance, you add your voice to the moment.
I've gazed into the void, you state.
The Dweller intends to do us harm.
You mistake your deity for the wind,
Eowyn says, narrowing his eyes.
This communion is a sham. The physician is complicit in concealing the truth.
Many of the sects voice their support, but you spy others who are glancing up at the summit of the towers. It was agreed that all parties would abide by the deliberate message, you remind him.
There will be a reckoning for this performance of falsehood,
the sect leader warns,
but I will honour our terms.
He turns to his flock.
Come, we shall reject these halls of deception and return to the roots.
Eowyn moves to depart. Yeah, I think that's fair, because Eowyn, like when we woke up, said, "Oh, it's clear that you've communed with some entity or god," and then as soon as it wasn't what he wanted to hear, it was like, "No, you haven't. You're just making it up. It's bullshit. You didn't commune with anybody." So, yeah, I think we're making the right call here and backing the abbot, because, as I said, Eowyn is just he's like a powder keg that's going to go off at some point, and we really do not want to be around it, and certainly we don't want the efforts to cure the plague to be around that. We may not have a choice ourselves. I think maybe he definitely bears us a grudge, and he may get revenge at some point. But let's move on. Eowyn moves to depart. There's uncertainty amongst the sect as their leader turns to leave. Most follow in sullen silence, but a handful remain in the courtyard.
Your master flees,
the abbot says to the strays.
I suggest you do the same.
Wait, you say, approaching a young man wearing a shawl of dried leaves. Why have you not followed like the rest? You ask. His body is curled in nervous agitation, but he manages to raise his head to glance at you between the words of his reply. Not sure he's doing the right thing? The leaves across his back rustle as he speaks. Could be. We want to join you. Fixing the plague. That's what we need now. At the sanctuary, you say, can you and your friends abide by the abbot's customs? In unison, the five of them proclaim their eagerness and loyalty. You look to Abbot Quelm, who appears to be pondering the recoupment.
We'll need as much help as we can get,
Ioko says, at the old man's shoulder.
Fine,
the abbot says with a dismissive wave.
The sage teaches us to nurture saplings who have turned to the light.
He welcomes the former cultists with a stiff tone and directs them towards Marilda for further assignment.
They are your responsibility,
he warns you as the recruits are guided away.
If I find they are desecrating this sanctuary, I will not hesitate to dismiss them.
Understood, you reply. Around you, monks begin to file out of the courtyard, returning to their duties about the building. The abbot starts to leave too, then hangs back.
I thank you for your support, he says. The sage owes you a debt.
With that, he joins the slow process of clergy as they make their way back inside. Come on, Alice says, already partway toward the entrance leading to their basement laboratory. Laboratory, whatever. We've wasted enough time on trivial theology. I feel the same. Enter the laboratory. The three of you stand around one of the converted laboratory workbenches. Three masked physicians pondering a small leather pouch. You stare at the unassuming bag with its creases and weathered textures, aware that it contains a substance that may bear sole responsibility for the chaos and suffering unfolding in the streets and buildings above.
It has to be this,
Alice says, beginning to pace alongside the bench. Her gaze does not leave the pouch.
It simply has to be. Because the evidence suggests as such, or because we're running out of time, Ayoko asks. It's flora we do not recognize, found growing on roots and tunnels beneath the town. We now know were used by smugglers, at the mayor's behest no less, she replies. That alone is enough to warrant testing.
Not to mention a pile of rat corpses in the vicinity, you add. Ayoko scratches his bearded chin beneath his mask.
Granted, that's something resembling a pattern, he says.
You nod in response and look back at the pouch.
Then let's cease these deliberations and prove this lichen is the plague's source,
Alice says, halting her agitated pace. You look into the masked faces of your colleagues. Behind you, the rabbits snuffle around the area constructed for them by Lucia. In the opposite corner, a pair of impassive monks still stand in rigid silence. You wonder if they are slipping beyond the reach of any cure.
I'll test the substance myself, Alice says, her tone firm. We can use one of the rooms above the sanctuary hall for isolation. If I begin to show clear signs of the waking death...
Alice, no! Ayoko exclaims.
There has to be a better way. Ways that will put others in danger, she replies, calm and direct. Gamble, you made me a promise.
This will only work if you can be certain that you are currently free of infection, you reply, sending out the idea with caution.
Gamble, says Ayoko, alarmed. You cannot be entertaining this. I slept without interruption after our return from the underground, Alice replies. Wherever affliction was intruding upon my rest has now passed.
Okay. Ooh. I suggest testing on the rabbits, maybe. So, right. So let's sort of think through this. So we promised Alice. Then we found out she's like a mad scientist, who would have done this one way or another, and who would have found a way to do this, even if it wasn't the most expedient way to do it. So that's something to bear in mind. Then at the back of that are our feelings towards her. But it's similar with Lucia. Although it's maybe a little more difficult with Alice, but it's similar in that we have to put the needs of everybody first. So we're weighing the needs of everybody versus the need to respect the promise that we made to Alice. So that's one thing. So that's one decision to make. The other decision then is we need to weigh the idea of putting Alice at risk or saving and saving all the people. So if it was the case of the only way we can be sure that this is the source of the plague would be to give it to Alice, and that would then we would assume would help us then to find the cure to cure everybody in the town, then we would have the situation where I think the balance would go towards respecting the promise we made to Alice, and being able to fulfill that and save the people would mean that we would pick the first one. The fact that there are other choices then does not make that argument as compelling, I don't think. So we should look at the other things. I believe we should seek volunteers among the sage clergy. I insist we should find volunteers among our medical recruits instead. I suggest testing on rabbits. Ayoko is taken to them, but it avoids endangering people. Right, so Gamel, I believe, being that he has so many years of experience as a surgeon, would put the needs of people above the needs of animals. Now, whether people can argue whether that's right or wrong, I think most people couldn't come down the side of it being right, but certainly a lot more people nowadays than previously would disagree with that. But I still believe Gamel would see people as being more valuable than animals. So with that in mind, so first of all of those other choices compared to risking Alice's life are more acceptable to Gamel. So the first one is ruled out, even though we know we're going against the promise that we made to Alice. And then the fact that we can test on the rabbits rather than anybody else, even the monks who are in the room with us, although they already have the waking death, so maybe, like, if we're thinking it's the source, they're probably not someone we would experiment on anyway. But yeah, I think the rabbits are what we're going to go with. So I suggest testing on rabbits. Ayoko has taken to them, but it avoids endangering people. So this then goes, it's going to be a problem for Ayoko, it's going to be a problem for Alice, and it's going to be a problem for Lucia. So we really are sticking to our principles here, and we're doing that at the detriment to our relationship with all of the people that we're closest to as well. So let's see how that ends for us.
It would spare us the anguish of risking human volunteers, Ayoko says, looking over at the rabbit pen. But would it provide conclusive answers? Wasn't the mayor wrong about these creatures catching the waking death?
Wrong about the Warrens being infected, you clarify. We don't yet know whether they are truly susceptible. If they are not, then that itself could be vital information.
You have a volunteer, says Alice, irritated. Allow me to do my job.
That's precisely why I don't want to risk you, you explain. You're the best theoretician among us. We'll need you doing that job for as long as possible.
I feel for these animals, Ayoko says, but Gamel is right. If the tests are inconclusive, that is when we can reassess. When it may already be too late,
Alice snaps. She shakes her head and sighs.
Fine, it's clear this decision is 2 against 1.
She motions towards the rabbit enclosure.
We should separate the animals, give a larger dose to one, smaller to another, and none to the last.
You nod in agreement. Thank you, Alice, you add.
You went back on your word, she replies, her voice flat. Best you don't speak to me for a while.
While Alice should come to forgive you in time, you sense that breaking your promise to her has extinguished any lingering romantic spark. Yep, there we go. Prepare the test. While Elko divides the rabbit pen into 3 compartments with some additional wooden panels, you organize the test according to Alice's suggestion. As you hold the brown rabbit in your arms, you see Alice approaching with a shallow bowl. The animal struggles slightly, twitching its nose towards your colleague's fox mask. You try to soothe it by stroking behind its ears, knowing in your sinking heart that the bowl contains this creature's fate. Your colleague holds the container up, allowing the rabbit to drink the substance. With a sigh, you place the animal back inside a smaller, isolated area. The rabbit with black fur is given a smaller dose and returns to the pen. In the final compartment, you watch the white-furred one lap at some clean water. There will be no lichen dose for Richard Cogg's favourite. You'll be able to console the steward with that, at least. Your bravery could save this town, you tell the animals without words. And if it does, I'll be sure to share your tale. No turning back now. You cross the sanctuary courtyard, looking down at the muddied, churned snow and the overlapping patterns of innumerable souls. The air is sharp, but the snowfall has ceased. It will be several hours before a fresh flurry can cover the disturbed earth once more.
What now?
Ayoko asks, his breath lingering around the boar's tusks. Now, you reply, we continue to care for our patients. We busy ourselves as best we can, but most of all, we wait. The waiting is torment. Okay, and that is where we are going to end that one. So I hope you have enjoyed. Hope you're keeping safe out there, and hope to see you next time. Goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe consider hitting the subscribe button there on the right, or checking out some other videos here on the left, or perhaps you might even share with some friends.